And we are live right here again on your Thursday night here on Chaos Tonight. Welcome, friends. How is everybody? Glad to see you. One out on your Thursday night to come and listen to my shit, so I really appreciate that. Every week that you folks are fantastic, and I really appreciate that. Appreciate it. I appreciate it more than anyone who has ever appreciated. Damn. All right. Well, anyway, folks, welcome to Chaos Tonight, and thank you for joining me. We are live here, as we are every single week, right here on Chaos Tonight. And there's a few things to talk about. I was going to open up with something real nice and mild and have a small talk, but you should have seen me right before we went on. I was just full of rage, and I really don't know if it was warranted rage. But before we get too far along, I want to remind everybody to please follow me on the Facebook and on the Twitter. And if you want to drop us any questions for later on in the show, you can also drop it at Facebook and Twitter. You'll find links down in the description box, which is something I tell you every single week, so feel free. And also, I want to tell you folks about, we'll talk. We're gonna go right off. We're gonna start off with something that was, I don't know if it should really bother me as much as it has, but for those of you that are on the Facebook every so often, I try not to. I get on there because, I don't know if you know this, but my brother and his wife, they had a little baby a little while back, and usually it's annoying when people put pictures of their kids and shit all over the Facebook. I don't usually care for it, but this is my blood, so, you know, I have to watch. And he's kind of a funny kid, so that's really what Facebook is for me. But recently, along the right-hand side, this would be your left, so the right-hand side, they put the trending, what's going on the internet, because whether you realize or not, that's them being subversive and trying to make you talk about what they want you to talk about, similar to the way the hashtags and all that nonsense that Michael Cole plugs in WWF programming. But anyway, one of the trending news items was that 370 some odd people decided to pay it forward at Starbucks. And it was a real nice feel-good story about how all these people, a nice lady about 7 o'clock in the morning, apparently senior citizens, why senior citizens have the money to shop at Starbucks, I haven't the vaguest idea. They didn't go into too much detail. But a nice lady, early in the morning, decided she was going to pay for the coffee for the people behind her. And then the people behind her paid for the money, or paid for the coffee for the people behind them, and so forth. And this went on for a number of hours. And the internet, which, if you didn't know, is, see, I want to explain something about the internet. See, you find people, and I mean specifically the people that bring questions to me during the week when we're not having Chaos Tonight. They say, how do you feel about this mean prick on the internet? All these mean people. And the internet is not full of mean people. The internet is full of your average, stupid Americans. People who believe that everything the television tells them. You know, the people that want to ignore warfare going on the other side of the country and teenagers being kidnapped and murdered. But to them, this is good news, that someone paid for somebody else's coffee, and they went and patted themselves on the back about what a great job they're doing as part of the human race because they paid for coffee at some overpriced coffee joint that enslaves the workers, but this was somehow a good thing. And then I did this really stupid thing, which I do sometimes. I read the comments. And somebody brought up a point about how the only person that really did anything nice was the person behind, or was the first person in line, and then there was a whole bunch of, you know, I won't say tossing of vitriol, but people saying, how can you be so bitter? How can you be so mean? It's like, well, number one, that person was just being realistic. And number two, that person didn't do anything nice. What did you do? You bought coffee. This did nothing but the only person that really won this thing was Starbucks. I'm going to tell you that right now. Okay? People like to dress this up as humanity taking care of themselves when someone in a car in front of you bought you poison. I don't care how you look at it. Coffee is not technically good for you. If this same thing had been done with cigarettes or alcohol, which do virtually the same amount of damage to you in the long run as having coffee, you know, high-grade coffee every single morning with all the acid and what that does to your intestines. Imagine that if someone had done that with, you know, say a fifth of bourbon, you know, for somebody at a liquor store, or cigarettes. the internet would have lost their fucking minds and said, how dare you do, but really all they're really doing is just supplementing the payment process for someone else's poison. And this, I don't really have a point or a way to wrap this point up, but it's so funny the way that people will simply just believe something is good because the internet told them so. It's the same thing. This is the reason we built the internet, to get away from this TV, feel-good bullshit. And now it's creeping into the edges, mostly because Disney and ABC are here, among a number of other outlets. So, folks, do actual nice things for each other instead of trying to pat yourselves on the fucking back for essentially just propping up commerce. That's all this really was a propping up of commerce. Jesus Christ, I need a drink. Cheers. Anyway, so welcome to Kaos Tonight. I know that was a bit of a rant, but Jesus Christ, doesn't that get fucking old? I know I keep promising I'm going to curse less on the program, but that upsets me. The way that people are just so easily led by, and it used to take a half hour of television or more of television programming with a bunch of commercials interspersed. You notice that. You notice how they tell you important stuff right after the commercial break. But what used to take an hour now only takes a few seconds thanks to your Facebook and Twitter feed, because you see one happy thing that you want to see and it sets your mind, your brain patterns for the rest of the day, because you are being brainwashed. I can't believe how easily led people are so easily led by headlines. Not even articles anymore. You don't even need to be convinced of anything. All you need is to see a picture of a kitty or a doggy and a few words that you like in a particular order, and, the human race is off and running and we're doing great things. We're not. You want to do something good for somebody? Don't buy them coffee. If you want to buy somebody, I've always found that funny, like how, in fact, I'm pulling this from Eddie Izzard, as a matter of fact. The international sex calling card was coffee. Would you like some coffee? So if you want to get laid, you get coffee. But if you're trying to be nice to people, I don't recommend you give them a roaring hot cup of acid. I really don't. What if the lady that got burned at the Starbucks, or not the Starbucks, at the McDonald's drive-thru back in the 90s, what if that coffee had got paid forward? The person in front of her would have been a fucking pariah in terms of, and news moves slower back then. So this person would have been a pariah for weeks, as opposed to this person is going to be, a hero for the next 24 to 30 hours. And, you notice how everyone wants to say such good things who are anonymous. Like, you don't know that. She could have been married to a Nazi or something who did horrible things at Auschwitz. You don't know that. She bought a cup of coffee, and that makes her a good person. And then everyone continued to funnel money into Starbucks, and that made them good people. Whoo, shit, I haven't even had a drink of my beer yet. Fuck those people. So, thank you, each and every one of you, for tuning in to Kaos Tonight. Now that I've had a drink, we can get on to happier matters, because I was going to talk about something different. And then I read that, and I just about lost my mind, and I was just here foaming at the mouth. And I had to tell you fine folks that, because I feel that sometimes I have to impart a wisdom, and not that I need to, because there's some smart cats out there. You know who you are. But some people, when I get a good idea, I feel I have to share it, because you may not have noticed. Because you don't know this, or maybe you do, but you see all sorts of stupid shit throughout your day. From the moment you wake up until this might even be one of those stupid moments, we don't know. But you see all kinds of stupid shit throughout your day. And what I do is I come around and remind you that there was some stupid shit not to be taken in by it, because you already saw it. You just forgot to balk and say something about it. And I'm here to remind you to balk and say something about it, because you're being misled. You're being misled for the sake of commerce. I'm sure you knew that, but, I just thought I would just bring that up because, why not? I consider myself a bit of a consumer advocate, and I try and be as helpful as I possibly can. So anyway, now we're going to move on to your questions. because you people always have some great questions, and I love to make sure everyone gets their questions answered. So before I refresh, I'm gonna see what's going on here, and let me see, answer a couple of quick questions that I saw off the top of my head. The Cutie Bear says, what are your thoughts on the Tales of series of games? Sweetheart, I think you've asked me that before, and I don't have a whole lot of experience with those. If you want to know a guy who knows about those, you want to talk to Return to Mother Base. He's the guy. We're trying to get him on the show here, but he's a busy person, and he could tell you all about that. So when Return to Mother Base is on here, make sure and ask him that, and then we can go back and forth about it, because I forget. I played one of those games, and I can't remember which one. That's how much of an impact it had on me. So I'm sorry if it feels like I'm shooting down your question, but I'm not the guy to ask about that sort of thing. They look nice. I'll give you that. Let me see here. Kit171 says, aloha. Aloha, Mr. Hand. Let me see here. Keldia the Horse says that you should never read the comments on the internet. Well, then how would you be able to gauge how dumb the internet is? See, and that's why I'm on more often now. I'm on here every single week to tell you how dumb the internet is and how you can protect yourself. And if you don't want to protect yourself, well, that's your problem. Let me see. Azure Bone Dragon wants to know my thoughts on the Zoe Quinn controversy. Now, I just read up about this. Somebody, who put that in there? Did Sarg Slim or somebody else? Yeah. Sarg Slim was wondering if I heard about the whole drama having to do with the indie developer named Zoe Quinn who used sex for favorable reviews with her game. It sparked a discussion about the abysmal state of gaming journalism. Well, game reviewers are not journalists. I'm going to make that very clear. I want you to know that. Because Mark Twain once said that, and you may have heard me say this before, but Mark Twain once said that journalism entails printing something that someone else doesn't want printed. Anything else is merely public relations. And that's the way I feel about game reviews. Game reviews are not genuine journalism. Game reviews are advertising with someone who appears to be less corporate, even though they're part of some corporate website. Game reviews, yeah. As you've heard me say many times on this program, game reviews are just like politics, monster trucks, and professional wrestling. They're fake. They're not real. They are there for two reasons: to influence the way you think and to get you to buy a product. And that is all. And that's that way across the whole thing. Reality TV doesn't fit into that because you've already bought the product whether you realize it or not. Unless you turn off. If you turn it off, then you win. That's if you didn't realize, reality TV, there's a game involved there. If you turn it off, you win. And everyone will be happier for it. Zoe Quinn, I had heard of once before, I think. And then I heard this pop up. You know, like I had heard the name. And then I heard this pop up that she was like using sex for favorable reviews. And really, I mean, I've seen this girl. And this is the hot bod that's swaying all the game reviewers. Not to say anything bad about her. I mean, you know, I've never seen her in person. I've just seen pictures. But that's the hot bod that's swaying all the game reviews. All right, if you say so. If you hadn't picked up, that's sarcasm. So, anyway, I didn't look and see which game it was, and I didn't see her game. I know that it seems, and you'll notice this, as history will show, the chase is usually better than the catch. So in this instance, the controversy is far more important than what it is that's controversial. What do I feel about it? I feel that, number one, I don't know this for certain, but I know, you know, in the cognitive side of my brain, the side of my brain that can notice patterns, this is not the first time this has ever happened. How do you think Jade Raymond has a job? among other women in the industry. And it's not fair. It's terrible because there are women. There are people of all kinds, sexes, genders, races, creeds, colors, that bust their ass to make this industry function because it seems that this industry is doing everything it can to keep from functioning. It just seems like it's done exactly what professional wrestling has done, in that the BS that surrounds the product is more important than the product itself. The problem is the BS that surrounds the product is not resulting in sales. And that's something you have to ask yourself whenever you think about things like this. Like, is this going to make money? Because it seems like there's far too many people who are interested in keeping controversy going, because there's this idea that controversy sells. Like, controversy used to sell when it was on TV. Because if it made it on TV, it must have been important. But the internet, anybody with a broadband internet connection can do the same thing. So what does it say about gaming journalism? It goes to show that gaming journalism is doing what it always wanted to do, which was getting nerds laid or rich. So, and yeah, if game reviewers are giving good reviews for that hot bod, then that's the sign of a slippery slope that has gone slick. You know, where can it really go from there? And girls, young ladies, and I know there's young ladies, budding game designers that watch this show. I know that for a fact. And if you wonder why you don't get any respect in this industry, that's why. You know? What we need to do is get a new controversy where we need, like, like the few good-looking game developers to lay some of these female game journalists for good scores. And then, and only then, will you have a truly balanced play field. And then by then it won't fucking matter anyway. So, but as far as I'm concerned, yeah, if you're giving up, if you're putting your journalistic integrity on the line for Zoe Quinn, who's really the sadder person in that situation? I don't know if that made any sense, but I'm just going to continue to drink until it does. Anyway. But yeah, that's how I feel about that one. Oh, I refreshed the wrong damn thing. Oh, sorry. Okay. Now, let's get down to the bottom here so we can, that's what she said. Ha 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 ha, I got you there before you could. Ha ha ha. But anyway, I want to answer everybody's questions because I know some people always get their, don't always get their questions answered. So we do what we can. Let me see here. Sorry, reading through your questions here. Apparently Sigma Sean likes my shirt. I got the Bob-omb shirt there. So I lean back, but even leaning back, you're not going to be able to see all of it. But there he is. There's my man, Bob. And you can't see it, but actually on this shirt he's not wearing any Weebox, so it wouldn't be as funny. Lupacillo wants to know my experiences with the Nintendo GameCube. I'm pretty sure I've gone on and on about my experience with the Nintendo GameCube. I didn't expose myself to the GameCube until I was an adult, until after I'd had a Nintendo Wii. But I thoroughly enjoy the Nintendo GameCube because, and what's really interesting about that is, number one, I enjoy the small form factor optical media. The reason for that is I really, having looking at it as a retro system because I wasn't there. I had a PlayStation 2 because someone bought me a PlayStation 2, so I never got around to the GameCube. A buddy of mine had the GameCube and had Legends of Wrestling for the GameCube, which is much better on the GameCube than it is anywhere else. And that was and Super Mario Sunshine. And that was really kind of my experience with the GameCube. And then when I was an adult, I started reading up more about it and see what I had missed. And I really enjoyed the philosophy because the small optical media, at least the way that I've read interviews, especially with Shigeru Miyamoto, and they could be, not translated properly, but it was always that the small disc implied that you didn't have to make a huge game. And I've always been in favor of that. I don't understand the concept that, because we live in an era where console games are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and longer and taking up even more of your life with each installment of a series. If you really look and if you pay any attention to what people talk about on the internet and what people talk about in their everyday lives, is that they don't have the amount of time that they used to, that they wish they had. I hear that more and more all the time, and that's why you have, your smartphones and your tablets and all that stuff, which have all these apps and things to make your life just a little bit easier, because people have done this to themselves. I'm not going to pretend like this just kind of happened magically. People overcomplicated their lives, and I honestly believe a lot of people have children too soon, and that overcomplicates your life, and get married too soon, and that overcomplicates your life. But in where that lies with video games is because everyone's still working off of an old model. Everyone's still thinking, at least treating the systems as though we're still in 2005, 2006, because that was at a time of a roaring economy and college students had money, which was really weird because I can't remember an era before that or after that of similarity. But anyway, the games just keep getting bigger and bigger. The Nintendo GameCube was small. You could take it with you places, which was really neat. And very importantly was that the games did not need to be huge. You know, there's some games on there that, like Mario Kart Double Dash, not the biggest Mario Kart game, but a good solid punch of fun. You know, it's not something you can beat in an hour. I mean, you could probably knock it out in a couple of days, but chances are you'll want to play it again, and that was the key. And I really dug that that's the way the GameCube was supposed to be. Don't get me wrong. There are some huge games on the GameCube. Terribly sorry for the 8-bit belch right there. There are some huge games on the GameCube, but I like the idea that they allowed it to be smaller. And I'm also attracted to the concept, the same thing for the Wii U and for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, is that smaller games are okay. You know, I mean, they should really be reflected price-wise. And, you know, and of course those are typically digitally distributed, and I'm not really in favor of that because really it only benefits the publisher. It doesn't help you at all. That's really the problem with video games. But you know, you've heard me say that over and again, is that the publishers make it about them when in fact it's about you. You know, but everything they do to line their own pockets. But you know, that's another discussion for another time. But that's my experience with the Nintendo GameCube. I love the Nintendo GameCube, even though and people are going to hate me for this, but I don't care if you hate me. F-Zero GX is inferior to F-Zero X on the N64. I'm sorry, but that's just the way things are. You can argue with me if you want, but, you know, it's sleek, it's fast, and that's most of it. It's not as charming as F-Zero on the N64 or on the Super NES. And there's nothing you can do that, you know, don't get me wrong. It's a great game, and the arcade version is just as good, if not better. But I don't feel it's a stronger game overall compared to the two previous F-Zeros. Is it weaker than the F-Zeros that have come since? No, probably not. You know, it definitely stands on its own. It holds its own, but I consider it weaker than F-Zero. Because immediately when people talk to me about the GameCube, the first place they go is F-Zero GX. And F-Zero GX is a fine game. F-Zero X is a better game, provided that you got a really good N64 controller. Because that was one thing that really set it apart, was the GameCube controller hangs in there better over time than the N64 controller does. But we've talked about that on this program. I don't need to go into any greater detail on that. But that's my experience with the GameCube. We could talk about individual games, but overall, that's my feeling on the GameCube. Lestat1011 wants to know when the next 8-Bit Podcast episode is. I told you guys that last week and the week before. We come back next fall, or not next fall, this fall. Hopefully the end of September. So, and I hope I don't have to answer that question next week because that one comes up a lot. It's like, it's summertime. If I haven't explained it already, is, you know, it's hot and no one wants to do a podcast and there's not really a lot of news. In fact, let me talk about that for a second because Mrs. Yellkaos, as I told you guys before, you guys get to hear the filtered, you know, worked out segments of this show, whereas Mrs. Yellkaos has to hear this live and raw with all the bullshit about I don't know what I'm talking about mixed in. But one thing that I get this every single week. Why aren't you guys doing another 8-Bit Podcast? It's a news program, folks. There's nothing to talk about. That's why we're gone every single summer. You know, myself or Razor Fist or Alpha Omega Sin or whoever we're having on the show at the time, we'll get together. Oh, there's nothing really much to talk about. And honestly, and we just want to give the best program we possibly can, and why force it? Because I find that forcing it only degrades the product. I feel that if it's just phoned in, it's not special, and we may as well have not done it at all. And I believe that you guys, the 8-Bit audience, for those of you that are here from the 8-Bit podcast audience, you deserve better. So, but keep an eye out on that channel, because we're going to have Chaos Theory Live coming to that show very soon with special guests. So I hope you join us for that one. I can't tell you when, because I don't know when. Still trying to hammer out the details. But yes. Let me see. Emmanuel De Luna says, what are my thoughts on Ubisoft ditching the Wii U? Hallelujah! Get the fuck out of here, Ubisoft. I'm sick and tired of this shit. You know, a lot of people have had questions for me. Lou Pasillo, chief among them, about the. He wrote me a question. How do I feel about the onslaught or the war being waged against Nintendo in the gaming journalism space? And I don't really see it as a war. I just ignore that shit now. I have gotten to that point where, see, because I used to read something on my, and once in a while I'll jump into it every so often, but something on my phone called Flipboard. And Flipboard used to be just, it was kind of like a custom-built magazine. It was all the, the best of the internet. But it's not the best of the internet. And most of internet gaming journalism, especially in the summer, is a whole bunch of bullshit fluff pieces designed to make you believe that the person who wrote this article knows what in the hell they're talking about. Like, believe me, if you're like on, there's like all these generic-ass game sites like allgames.com and all this crap. It's just some freaking 16-year-old kid who's probably going to take a journalism class or a composition class, feels that he's now a gaming journalist and he can say this, and because he said it on the internet and all this other crap. I don't listen to any of that. Are people really waging a war against Nintendo? No. If you look at the media space, Nintendo's winning. Because there's a universal truth in video games. He who has the games controls the situation. And that's the way it is. So, it's cannon fodder, it's BS. It's just nonsense. See, because, and I've talked about this before, how the internet and coupled with the video game journalism sect and the supposed video game community, which over the last few years doesn't really resemble a community, but, what are you going to do? It just seems like there was this eventual spawn of the 24-hour news cycle, which then transitioned to the internet and into games, where there's gaming news all the time. Games take a long time to make, so most of this is fluff pieces. And the 24-hour news cycle has, in my opinion, created a beast that cannot be fed. No two ways about it. And now, because there's less people making games, because these publishers are laying people off in droves, there's less games coming out, so you're going to see even more of these BS fluff pieces for people trying to convince you that they still know what they're talking about, even though they're making up game news when no games are coming out. I shouldn't say no games, but few games are coming out, and few games are being sold because it's the summertime. People are always surprised when gaming, make this big deal when gaming hardware slows, during the month of June or the month of July, and they didn't do this all through the month of July. Yeah, it's not Christmas time. We do not live in an era of an absolutely roaring economy where people are spending money like it's on fire. We don't have that anymore. That was a one-time thing. And just because you happen to be a teenager or were paying attention when that was going on doesn't mean that's the way it is. That was a fluke. And this has created just a very unhealthy environment. So that's my feelings on that. I think it's just a bunch of BS fluff pieces. It's not real. It really isn't. And Nintendo, they're doing what you should probably do. Just ignore it. It's a bunch of people who are just trying to get attention and ruffle your feathers. And because we've come from an era where it used to be a trusted news source, you had to gain trust. Now, there's this idea that you become a trusted news source, but people don't want to be a trusted news source. That's not what they're interested in being a trusted news source. They want to be a star. They want to have their face on paper or on the internet and to be regarded by people who are important in gaming. And you'll notice the people who are important in gaming are usually not people who are making any goddamn games. So I don't understand why those people are important. Adam Sessler and other people among them. Who's the fat guy? Jim Sterling. I don't want to poke at it for being fat, but he's the new age Otho. Good for him, whatever. But those people are more important than the people who are actually making the games. I'm not talking about the publishers. I'm not talking about the people who manage the offices, who for some reason they're important. I can't figure that out either. But the people who are making the games, it seems like, and it seems like that's what everyone's interested in. Instead of being a trusted source, they just want to be a tool. That way they're known. In YouTube and the online people who do things similar to me, and Alpha Omega Sin and so on, guys like us, who have their face in front of a camera and say things like I say, that there's this idea that you just be, it's kind of like what's happened in professional wrestling. I make a lot of references to professional wrestling in terms of games journalism and politics because it's virtually the same thing. I'm not even exaggerating. Even if you pay attention a little, you'll notice in professional wrestling, we don't have big bad heels anymore. There's just these piss ants that you want someone to just beat them up. But they never do beat them up for one reason or another. And then there's never really a payoff. Well, that's what we have here online and in the online space in terms of games. You get some kid who gets on a camera and says that, the Wii U's a bunch of bullshit because that's a nice, comfortable platform. And then they want people to agree with them, and then they're surprised when no one agrees with them. But they didn't really mean what they said. They just said it so people would either love them or hate them just to enjoy their face. Tired of that stuff. So I think I drifted way off, but hopefully I made a few points. And by the way, Ubisoft is a bunch of crapola. Damn it. Lupusilla wants to know, do I know what it takes to get a game reviewer laid? Apparently scores. It takes scores to make scores. You can apply that to drugs too, so just a little practical advice. Caldia the Horse says he's going to persuade Square Enix with cosplay and finally get his their Final Fantasy VII remake. Hey, if that's what you want, be my guest. Are you going to shake your ass at them? If that's your form of persuasion, good for you. We're gonna break from games for a second because Nintendo Gamer wants to talk about my favorite metal live albums. My favorite metal live albums. Let me see here. One that really sticks out is Black Sabbath's Reunion from back in the 90s. I remember when that record came out, I was like 16, and a friend of my mom's had just bought it, and he had a really nice stereo system. Had it on compact disc. And he had the big, nice headphones. And I put the big headphones on, I laid back, and I looked, and there was an ashtray, and it had half a joint in it. And I said, this is going to be some fun. And I just sat there with an ashtray and a joint, and I listened to Black Sabbath Reunion. That was a good time. Another good one is Slayer's Decade of Aggression. That's a great one. Another one I could recommend, as far as albums, my favorite anyway. Another one is Exodus, Good, Friendly, Violent, Fun. That's a really good record. And I'd say Iced Earth, Alive in Athens. Iced Earth, Alive in Athens is not it's a great album. It really is. I'll say that. It's a great album. But since Iced Earth, they kind of perform the songs, they don't really stray from the way they were performed on the albums. And there's not a whole lot of banter that goes on in between the songs and different things that really sets them apart. It's a very straightforward live album. Here's songs performed live. It's neat, but it makes it on the list just because of its sheer volume, because it's long. It's like 32 songs. There's over 3 discs. And there are people that I know, a couple of dudes, friends of mine I know, that have it on vinyl. My friend Kevin has it on vinyl. And I said, dude, you're out of your freaking head. He paid some serious money for it. Doesn't even own a phonograph. Doesn't even have a record player, but has it on vinyl. It's a beautiful piece, beautiful. And I've never touched the discs on the inside. He won't let me, but it's very impressive. So those are some favorite metal live albums of mine. If anything else jumps to mind, I'll remember. I know those are probably fairly well-known albums, but Those are the ones stick out for me. Kit171 says, do you think anyone will be interested in buying Shaq Fu 2 if it does end up releasing? Maybe. I guess it depends on the way it's... I'm not interested in it in the slightest. Shaq Fu, in my opinion, gets far too much hate. It's not as bad a game. It's not very good, but there are far worse fighting games than Shaq Fu that you could come across, just like there are far worse games than E.T. People always like to think that E.T. is the worst game ever made. It's like, no, this is, again, like people like I was talking about, people that don't read the articles, they just read a headline and see a picture they like and then just parrot whatever conclusions they draw. But Shaq Fu's not the worst game you could come across, but I won't buy it. You know, if other people are interested in it, you know, maybe. I don't think it's going to sell that well. I think some people will buy it for a laugh, but why would you buy a digital game if it comes out digital for a laugh? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like, if you go through the vault over there, I've got a whole bunch of terrible games. You know, I have Barbie games, you know, that are just hilarious, and you can hold it and you can look at it and say, someone spent fucking money on this. But if you buy a digital game, you got to fire it up and show your friend, hey, look, this game sucks, and then they'll say, well, why'd you buy it? Because it sucks. Well, you're stupid. Yeah, maybe. So, you know, if people buy it and that's what they want, good for them. If not, well, no skin off my nose. Let me see. Lewis Williams wants to know, are there any British alcoholic beverages that you enjoy? I don't know really any. A lot of people immediately say Newcastle, but people in Newcastle don't even like Newcastle. I don't know. I can't think of really any. I like bitters. I like Angora bitters because I like there's a whiskey cocktail I enjoy called an old fashioned, and an old fashioned involves Angostura bitters, and that's really the only thing because I know bitters are British, but not off the top of my head. I like a black and tan, but that has Guinness in it. I'm trying to think of British. I don't know, Louis. You're gonna have to tell me some British. You're gonna give me like multiple choice because I can't think of any. I mean, it might be because I'm drinking a little bit. I can't think of any British beverages or cocktails off the top of my head. At least something that's succinctly British or from the United Kingdom. So. Let me see here. Lupacillo wants to talk about the GameCube again. Would I say me? He says, would you say the GameCube is Nintendo's most player-focused console? I think they've all been player-focused consoles. I can't think of any instance where they've ever been anti-player or anti-consumer. The GameCube was far more single-player focused, if that's what you mean, as was the N64, even though they had the 4 ports on the front. At least that's the way it felt to me, even though there's, you know, obvious games that lend away from that. Excuse me, a little more 8-bit gas there. I apologize. Oh, there it goes. Whew! All right. Now you're playing with power. Let me see here. Let me see. You know, the GameCube, I think that the GameCube was the most powerful and most versatile in that because it had the Game Boy player, which did far more than the Super Game Boy, and it was just people don't realize this, but it was the most powerful system out at the time, even though it was terribly small. It was extremely powerful. I think it was just a great game. As far as being player focused, sure. More so than the Wii. The Wii seemed to be more about making multiplayer a thing again, but multiplayer in the same room, which is nice, because you know, because people badmouth Nintendo for what they do with online gaming, and I'm not a huge fan of online gaming. Maybe because I got my start on. I shouldn't say I got my start. I actually got my start on Atari stuff, but I don't know. as far as online multiplayer, realize this: no matter what you say about online multiplayer, you will always be at the mercy of your internet connection. No matter how good the game is, no matter how good your system is, you will always be at the mercy of your own internet connection, which is sad. Cutie Bear wants to know, she's heard my thoughts on Square Enix, but what do I think on someone like her going to apply to work there? That depends on what it is that you want to do. As far as I'm aware, they're not the big juggernaut they once were, and they don't have a whole lot of people working there. Depends really on what you want to do. Um, if I were you, I'd wait a couple of years. I mean, regardless, you're going to wait a couple of years because I don't see there being a real upswing in the demand for their products anytime soon. And when I say soon, I mean within the next year. So if that's what you want to do, but it all depends on what you want to do there. If you want to be a secretary or if you want to be an art designer, you know, those it just depends because there's people forget that there's a lot of other jobs in gaming besides making games. There's marketing, there's advertising, which is, you may not believe this, but are different things. There's management, there's clerical people, all that sort of thing. And all those companies need that sort of thing. And it seems like they need more of that than they need people making games. Because they're just throwing away people that are making games. They're like, hey, do you make games? Oh, did you spend $50,000 on your education? Well, we're going to throw you in the trash now. We're going to go get some kid that'll take, you know, half your salary to do the same thing. Let me see here. Everybody loves the GameCube. That's good. That's good. Let me see. Let me see. Lupacillo's arguing with me about. Oh no, he's talking about F-Zero X. I was gonna say, you arguing with me about F-Zero GX? You're gonna get a sidewalk slam, boy. And if you quickly say, oh, well, I thought he was getting a jackknife power bomb, well, my knees are a little too worked over to be doing jackknife power bombs at everybody. Plus, I also know that I could use a sidewalk slam in a fight a lot easier than I could a jackknife power bomb. Jackknife power bomb works best when someone's cooperating with you. Let me see here. Super North Show wants to know my favorite old school PC games. You would have to be more specific in what is or is not old school. And do I keep any old PCs around, like the Commodore 64, Amiga, or legacy Windows machines? We don't keep anything terribly old around here. Anything really old runs on DOSBox. And you'd be surprised, a lot of old school Windows games still run fantastically on Windows 7. The one that I play a lot is Roller Coaster Tycoon on this particular machine, the one that we're doing the live stream with. I use Roller Coaster Tycoon, and it runs smooth as silk on Windows 7. So a lot of old Windows 95, Windows 98 games run smooth as silk on Windows 7. So as far as old systems, no. I used it when I was a kid. I don't know if I've told you this. I hesitate to show you, but when I was a kid, the gaming system, I mean, because we had the Atari, which, because my dad was a cross-country truck driver for McDonnell Douglas. McDonnell Douglas is now called Boeing Aeronautics, or Boeing Aerospace, rather. My dad worked for McDonnell Douglas, and because I was a kid, I didn't know how to solder yet. I was like maybe 10. And so the RF switch on the Atari would wear out a lot. And this is going to be a long I don't know if it's going to be a long story, but it's going to be a meandering story. So if you guys will please, if you'll indulge me this, I'd really appreciate it. Because I've been meaning to talk about this for a little while. This really goes to talk about my roots as a gamer. Because, I mean, when I think about this, when I grew up in a really crummy town. Not the crummiest town, obviously. I didn't grow up in, like, Flint, Michigan or anything. But I grew up in a really crummy town called Paris, California. And when I was a kid, somehow I got really good with, somebody had a computer, some friend of the family. I got really good with computers, early PCs. My dad bought a cassette. I know this is. I'm coming around to a point. I promise you. My dad bought a cassette called the Fundamentals of MS-DOS, and I learned MS-DOS in and out. So my dad, in his infinite wisdom, in 1992 or 1993, I was like 10 years old, bought a Tandy 1000EX, which was ancient when he bought it. My dad was not notorious for his spending decisions. You know, we had a bunch of motorcycles in our garage, but we couldn't spend more than $100 on a personal computer. But so by the time I got a hold of it and learned how to use it, I didn't know, there was no internet to tell me this, but I didn't realize this thing was extremely out of date. I had no idea how old it was. It should have given me a bit of a dead giveaway when I would pop in. I was using MS-DOS, I think 3.4. And MS-DOS 3.4 would load up and tell me a copyright date of like 1981, and for some reason I didn't think about that. But anyway, so when I was a kid, my dad was away. We had the Atari. The Atari would, the solder lugs would wear out of it, and I couldn't solder them back together. So I had to wait for my dad to get home from a trip across country, usually to Toronto, Canada, a lot of times, to get back to solder the Atari back together, because for some reason my brother would fuck with it, or I'd fuck with it, and it'd break, and Dad would have to fix it. And this is right around the time where the Nintendo was just, sometimes it worked, sometimes it wouldn't, sometimes you blow in the cartridge and all that stuff, and sometimes that would do it, and this is when we figured out to slam the ZIF and all that stuff with your thumb, or stick a pencil in it, and all those different things, which I didn't know what was causing it until years later. And so, and we hadn't got the Super Nintendo yet. That wouldn't be for like another year. But we had the Tandy 1000EX, and right around this time, Radio Shack, I think, was trying to get out of the computer game business, and so they were just blowing out PC games. And I wish I knew where those damn things went, but just blowing out PC games for, you know, $2 and $3 a piece. I remember I got a copy of Choplifter for the Tandy 1000. It was actually for PC IBM compatible, and required only an EGA display, which I had a VGA display, so I was Mr. Hot Stuff at the time, and it was a very old VGA display. It wasn't a Super VGA. And so I played all kinds of games like that. And one that really sticks out for me is Microsoft Flight Simulator. I was very disappointed that you couldn't, you know, shoot things, or, you know, like the most fun was, you know, putting in a nosedive and the thing explodes. But yeah, if I were to say that Choplifter for the IBM compatible, which initially, if I'm not mistaken, I had to play with a serial mouse. A serial mouse. This is before I would eventually get an official. My grandparents' neighbor, Mr. Stetter, gave us an official, or gave me rather, an official Tandy joystick that he had no use for, and it made Choplifter so much better. So, but yeah. Oh, that's what I meant to show you. I meant to show you guys my my street cred for the Tandy. So. That's an old mouse pad. I bought that. Somebody got me a gift certificate to Radio Shack in like 1993, I think, the very same year, and they were blowing out those things. I got that for like $1. So I thought that was cool. Let me see here. Lewis Williams wants to know how old was I when I first played guitar? When I first like handled a guitar, or first started to learn? I started to learn when I was 12, like seriously learn. But I had been, you know, trying to figure out guitar because my great grandfather would play all the time when I was like 8, and shortly after that, I found out my great grandmother could really get down on guitar too, which was weird. You know, I guess weird in hindsight, but at that time, it was like, well, just grandma plays guitar, and like grandma played guitar more than grandfather played guitar. But and my first guitar, my very first, was actually my great grandfather's 3/4 size nylon string mariachi guitar, which I still have to this day. I've been meaning to make a guitar story about it, but I'm just I don't know, I just haven't gotten around to it. It needs to be cleaned up, but and it's in rough shape, so it doesn't play anymore. It absolutely can, but I won't just because it's a relic. My grandfather bought it in Mexico, in Juarez, in like 1930 something, and I still have it to this day. But yeah, I was 12 when I started to learn how to play, right after my great grandfather died. In fact, I had started learning before he passed, but he was sick at the time, and that was in like 1995, so I was 12. And that my dad kind of fucked up that guitar. He didn't mean to, but he did, and so he had to replace my guitar with. If you've ever seen me do any acoustic guitar videos, I use a Washburn. What is it, like a D1235 Dreadnought guitar, and that was the one that replaced the mariachi guitar, and I still have it to this day. So that was my first, and that was my first experience playing guitar. And I realize now that my experience playing guitar was actually my grandmother, my father's mother. She was actually hustling me to play guitar because she wanted me to play guitar. She had a folklorico dance troupe and wanted a guitar player. It's kind of a sneaky way to go about getting a guitar player, you know, hustle your grandson into learning. And then I learned to play rock and roll, and you know, she didn't want to talk about it anymore. My grandmother was kind of a bitch. But yeah, maybe I'll do. I could do a. I should do a guitar story about that guitar, because I think that's kind of neat. There's a neato story in there, and I can also show you the weird ass acoustic, the De Armand electric acoustic pickup that came with it, which I don't even know if it works anymore. I have to look into that. The Cutie Bear wants to know my feelings, my thoughts on Dio. The person, I think Ronnie James Dio was hilarious. As far as a singer, I think that he was one of the most masterful metal singers that there ever was, ever. And a nice guy to boot. A genuine talent. And even though people talk about how great Dio is and all the things that he did so much for heavy metal. Most people don't realize that. The great things that he did before anybody else. You know, the medieval, high fantasy aspect to heavy metal, that was him. He did, you know, people want to give that to Ritchie Blackmore, but I think Ritchie Blackmore was really influenced when he got Ronnie James Dio into Rainbow, and then what Ronnie James Dio did in Elf and so on, but years before. He did so much for heavy metal, and I don't think that don't get me wrong, people speak very highly of him, but I don't think that people really realize what Ronnie James Dio did, because people always give Rob Halford credit for bringing in, and I guess Bruce Dickinson for bringing in the spikes in the leather, which derived from homoeroticism and sadomasochism, bondage and discipline, things like that. So we have them to thank for that. If you've ever seen the Police Academy movies, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I think that Ronnie James Dio does not get the credit he genuinely deserves. So, Curtis Corner wants to know my favorite Slayer album. His favorite is God Hates Us All. I find that God Hates Us All is probably one of the weakest Slayer albums. I don't find it very entertaining. It's right up there. It's probably a little bit stronger than Diabolus in Musica, which was their new metal, alternative metal album, which, for those that you were surprised, yeah, Slayer, just like everybody else, just like Exodus before them, tried to jump, because there's always this, it's interesting. I'm going to digress for a second. It's interesting because you read a lot of supposed music journalism and historical music coverage that talks about heavy metal in the 1990s, and you only get a few select stories. Either Nirvana came and destroyed everybody and no one was seen for a long time, which is totally untrue. You know, when Nirvana was on the scene, Metallica and Slayer and Anthrax were killing it. You know, it wasn't until Kurt Cobain died that music really got a shot, and that was only for like a year and a half, 2 years. Grunge was freaking gone by like 1996, you know. Alternative music was struggling to hold on at that point, and then the alternative metal in the late 90s was coming along. And that's the only thing everybody wants to talk about, when some of the finest heavy metal ever was forged in that period. But I got off topic. My favorite Slayer album. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Years ago, when I was a teenager, I would say Rain in Blood or South of Heaven. But now I realize one that I like to listen to, still like to pop it in, is shit. What's it? Show No Mercy. The very first Slayer album, Show No Mercy, is great because if you really listen to it, based on what you know about Slayer now, you'd be like, who the hell is this? But it's a really interesting album, and it just sounds like a totally different band, which it is. Even though, because they were kids. They didn't know what they were doing. They were just doing the best they knew how, and they were just kind of following the example set forth by, like, Judas Priest and Exciter and Accept and Venom and things like that. So, but yeah, my favorite Slayer album to listen to is Show No Mercy. God Hates Us All, on the other hand, does have the most poignant and metal release date of all time. People don't realize this, but God Hates Us All was released at 12:01 a.m. Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. 3 hours before, when I say 3 hours, because the September 11th attack came at 6 a.m., and that was released at 12:01 Pacific time, because they released it here in California, because that's where they're from. But, yeah, 6 hours before the September 11th attack, God Hates Us All. And that's the real bummer was, well, I shouldn't say a bummer, but because that release got totally overshadowed. The story goes, my friends and I were going to go to the store, and we were going to go to the release of God Hates Us All, because Slayer hadn't done an album in a while. And they totally flaked, and I think got drunk and fell asleep, and I, didn't wait for them. I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning, and the World Trade Center's on fire. So that was an interesting feeling for me. But yeah, that's an interesting album that you picked out, because it has a really interesting release date. Kit171 wants to know if I like Mad TV or Saturday Night Live more. I don't care for television really at all. I'd say that Saturday Night Live has the better track record just because they've been around far longer than Mad TV. Is Mad TV still on? Mad TV had its moments. Mad TV had the stronger recurring sketches, like when they did the classic TV in Spanish, which for some reason I thought was hilarious. In fact, I think they did like I Love Lucy and All in the Family in Spanish, which I just thought was hilarious. But I would give the edge to Saturday Night Live because it's really fostered more talent and has been around for longer. So that's the only reason. But yeah, is Mad TV still on? Whatever. Let me see here. Super North Show wants to know my thoughts on Korn. I think Korn's a bunch of shit. Oh wait! I like that one song. That disco song they do? Got the Life. I like that one. That one's a pretty damn catchy song. And for some reason, girls with big tits who are into Korn love to touch their tits when they hear that song. I don't know what it is. It's just in my experience. I've been to some parties. I've been to some fucked up parties. Let me tell you, and that's happened. So, for better or for worse. But yeah, aside from that song, I think Korn can jump in a hole. I don't care. Bleeding Vengeance wants to know what I have against Ohio. I don't really have anything against Ohio per se. All I know is that my very good friend Ed T1138 and a few other people who live in Ohio love to tell me how much, or well, Ed doesn't, but other people love to tell me how much Ohio sucks. And Ed always shows me pictures of how Ohio sucks. Like, your roads are terrible. Abandoned strip malls left and right along the highways. It's similar. We kind of have a similar problem in California, to where we have strip malls and real estate developments that have like 10 and 20 and 30% occupancy, but they're building new stuff right next to it. And so we're going to have that same problem in about 25 years' time, if not sooner. Depending on how well we can do with water and shit. But I don't have anything particularly against Ohio. If I don't make this clear enough, I have a definite soft spot right here for the Midwest. So much so that I said right here, because that's how folks in the Mid-Atlantic and the Midwest talk. They say cheer. They're usually cheery folks sometimes, very racist sometimes too. But I have a soft spot for the Midwest, which is why I like to go to the Midwest Gaming Classic. But the key problem is it's in Wisconsin, so I'd have to fly. And number two, once I get there, I'm in Wisconsin. If anybody can tell me what the hell else there possibly is to do in that part of Wisconsin when the expo's not going on, I'd love to hear it. But yes, no, I have nothing particularly against Ohio. My good friend Silent Rob lives in Ohio. Ohio's trying to kill him, last I heard, but, you know, what can you expect when you live aboard a train? Let me see here. Kit171's asking me again about do I miss when game consoles used to come in many colors. Kit, I told you this before. They still do that. They do that all the time. Look at the 3DS. I have a black 3DS. The original one was blue, and Mrs. Yellkaos has a purple one, and there's a red one. Usually, multiple colors is to celebrate a sales milestone. The 8th generation has not made any of those milestones, despite what the websites want you to believe. I want to talk about this for a second real quick before we move on. I read an article, I forget who put it up. Somebody put it up, and I came across it, that there was a talk of, yay, the Sony PlayStation 4 has sold 10 million units. When the PlayStation 3 was out, if they had sent a press release to for instance, Spike TV, or not Spike TV, but like G4 or somebody who covered this thing, yeah, we sold 10 million units. They would tell them to fuck off with your 10 million units and talk to us when you're doing, Nintendo Wii, Xbox 360 numbers. So you're celebrating 10 million when that wasn't a very big deal last generation. So the reason you're not seeing as many of those colored consoles is because they're not reaching these sales milestones yet. They may never. And the only time you're going to see them in extra color anytime soon is, a special Mountain Dew edition. Because the only time, like I said, the only time that things are really done is to benefit the publishers, not you, which is the other way around of the way it's supposed to be. Let me see here. Kelly of the Horse wants to know Bayonetta or Samus. In what regard? Who do I prefer? I'm a bigger Metroid fan than I am of Bayonetta, because Bayonetta, she's just on her second game. I don't think that, because there are people who want Bayonetta in Smash Brothers. I don't believe in that, because this bitch has not really, proved herself yet. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure she's real tough and everything. She's got guns in her shoes, but I don't think she's really proved herself just yet. Just yet. Let me see here. Lupacil says the GameCube is their least family-friendly system. I don't agree with that. I know that they didn't try to appeal to families, which was their major failing. They tried to appeal. See, and that was the major mistake. And this was a real misstep, and I love this, I try and say as much nice things about Hiroshi Yamauchi as I can, but the GameCube, he's right when he said that the GameCube showed that he was out of step, because he was looking for a much larger sales return rate by appealing to a much smaller market. And that doesn't work. Similarly to what the Xbox is finding out, They're trying to appeal to a niche market and doing everything they can to piss those people off, and they're wondering why they're not getting the sales they were. You need to appeal to the people, A, that want your product, and B, the people who have the money to buy your product. Because simply advertising to poor-ass kids is not getting you where you need to be. Manic Maniac wants to know, do I like the band Beer Bear? I'm not familiar with Beer Bear. Mark Cloud, what do I think about America's obsession with beauty? I don't think America has an obsession with beauty. I think America has an obsession with a shiny paint job. Beauty and the American perception of beauty are two entirely different things. The beauty that you're talking about on TV is BS. Okay, what you're talking about is an Earl Scheib job. Genuine beauty cannot really be gauged, at least for Americans to really take notice. Lupacillo says that Square Enix could use some good translators. That's right. So if you speak Japanese, Square Enix needs your help. Mr. Skate Flip says, you ever get all your shit taken in Zombie U? No, that's never happened to me. Caldia the Horse says, is college a scam, Mr. Chaos? Which is me. That's me. Yes. For the most part. Well, I shouldn't say for the most part. It depends on what you want to do with your life, but not everybody needs college. I went to college, and now I'm just in debt. Not everybody needs college. You'll notice that there have been studies, many studies, that show that we are graduating entirely too many college graduates. Why is that? Because our colleges are privatized. The same reason there are so many fucking people in prison, because our prisons are privatized. Anytime somebody stands to make money, there are people that will be, what's the word? What do you call it? Fucked with, I guess. That's the exploited. You know, there's this idea, and it was when I was a kid. There were so many people that said, "Oh, well, you can't get a job without making sure you go to college and college and college and college." Mind you, these were also the same grown people that were telling me that computers are where the money are. Computers. But now computers are fucking everything. So what the hell do you know? You know. Well, what do you know? You know. Anyway, but you know, it's different for different people. But college is not for everybody. And the only reason they want you to believe that you need college is because they stand to make $1 from it. That's why. So it all depends on what you want to do with your life. You want to be a marine biologist? Yes, you need to go to college. Do you expect to make money being a marine biologist? You're just wasting your time. I knew a lot of people. You know, I knew a lot of girls, a lot of pretty girls, a lot of pretty stupid girls that wanted to be marine biologists. Like, so you want to work in an aquarium or at the zoo for $25,000 to $40,000 for the rest of your life, if you can even get a gig doing it in the first place. I don't mean to badmouth marine biologists. I just heard that a lot, and I'm like, why? I want to work with animals. Why? Oh, Lupacillo's challenging me. I don't think so, motherfucker. You can run your mouth all you want. I've seen you and your crinkly mustache. Let me see. Manic Maniac wants to know, do I like Vigilante 8? Yes and no. It felt more like, you know, when I played it was on the N64, and it's like the N64's answer to Twisted Metal. It's okay. I like Twisted Metal better. Merit 2014 wants to know if I ever played a PC engine. Yes, I have. And it's virtually the same experience as the TurboGrafx 16. Kill the other horse. I'm starting to learn the French horse. The French horn. Excuse me, the French horse. There's no such thing as a French horse. You're learning the French horn? Well, I'm not a wind player. I don't have the lung power to do that. But if I can offer you any advice that I learned, because when I was in school, the band teacher, Mr. Calderhead, was a French horn player, and that dude had some lungs, could hold notes for minutes, you know, which was really impressive. And so the best advice I can give you if you're going to learn the French horn, don't smoke. That's really the best advice I can give you, is don't smoke. So, Mrs. Yellkaos is beckoning me, if you guys will excuse me. Yes, darling. All right. Anyway, yeah, don't smoke. If you want to learn the French horn, don't smoke. Lupacillo wants to know my WrestleMania predictions. We're all the way on the other side of WrestleMania. I don't even want to think about WrestleMania, because, as I've said before, if they're going to go for Undertaker Sting or Undertaker anybody, with how horrible I know that any match involving The Undertaker at this point is going to be, you know, imagine the crap they're going to put underneath it. So, let me see. If you don't support the Nintendo GameCube, you're a fuck. When did I say that? Did I say that? Well, if I said that, then... Alright, then, yeah. If I said it, then it must be true. Havel the Rock says... What do you think about corn? I like it best on a cob. Lupacillo says that Minnesota sucks worse than Ohio. In the wintertime, absolutely. The Minnesota summer is far nicer than Ohio. I've been to Minnesota in the summertime. Minnesota is actually a pretty decent place. But yeah, if you don't like shoveling snow, don't go to Minnesota from like October to May. Let me see here. Cutie Bear wants to know if I enjoy doing any extreme sports like surfing or snowboarding. Do they still call them that? Are they still extreme sports? I used to surf, and I used to snowboard, and I used to skateboard, and I stopped doing that. Well, I stopped skateboarding because my skateboard got stolen, and I just never got around to buying another one. And I've had a series of knee injuries, so it's just not worth the hassle. Plus, to do that to surf and to snowboard is really expensive. The equipment to do it is really expensive, and just to drive. I live in San Diego. To drive up to the snow is a big pain in the ass, and to get in the I don't really want to go into the ocean anymore, just because every time I go to the ocean is disgusting. The Pacific Ocean is treated like just horribly. So I don't really do that sort of thing anymore. Yeah, I still the most extreme sport that I do. I don't wrestle either. No, the only sport that Mrs. Yellkaos and myself indulge in is for those of you that followed the program for a long time is disc golf, frisbee golf, and Mrs. Yellkaos dominates it at frisbee golf. Let me see. Lupacillo says the console should come in antifreeze green. The one did. There was the Mountain Dew Xbox, which is definitely antifreeze green. And hopefully they have one at the Video Game History Museum in Las Vegas. Not at Las Vegas, but the Classic Gaming Expo. Since we're on the topic, Classic Gaming Expo coming up September 12th, 13th, and 14th. Just about 3 weeks away. It's going to be a big time, and I hope you guys, if you're in the near vicinity of Las Vegas, Nevada, make your way out for more information, cgexpo.com. And hopefully we'll cover some of that. Let me see here. And Lupacillo also says that PlayStation 4 sold 10 million units, but no software. Yeah, I've seen figures all over that show that no one's buying games for this, but the machines are being sold. And, it's ridiculous. But I guess if that's what people want. Kit171 wants to know some games I feel deserve more attention when they didn't really come out again. I don't have any off the top of my head now, but I might make a video about that. Because it's hard to gauge. It really is. Because we live in an era where all games get coverage, just not major television campaigns and stuff like that. So, like I talked about, this pseudo-journalism that we deal with, which is essentially just homemade press releases and public relations. Doing public relations for a company that you don't work for is not paying you. Lupacillo says the Xbox is trying to appeal to residents of Oregon and Washington who go to Starbucks and wear thick glasses and fuzzy sweaters. I think you're just talking about people who live in Seattle and Portland, not necessarily Oregon and Washington as a whole, because those are rural, backwoods places. People don't realize that. It's just like the outskirts of Ohio, not Ohio, but Idaho. Anywhere outside of Boise or Des Moines, Idaho, or outside Des Moines in Iowa, out of Boise, Idaho, I messed that one up big time. Outside of Boise, Idaho is just, kind of desert and woods. High desert and woods. So, yeah, I think you're talking about specifically people that live in Seattle and Portland. And I think they're really actually just going after the rich-ass people who live in Seattle. Lewis said, "Do you teach yourself to play guitar, or did you have no?" I'm going to go and say 97% self-taught. I've interfaced with other guitar players, but I've never had a one-on-one lesson because usually, I've always found it funny that people who play guitar are under the impression that they're part of a small lot, like millions of people play guitar. And if not millions, at least hundreds of thousands of people play the guitar and are halfway decent at it. And I've noticed, like, when I was a kid, there was just these guys that I knew were just washed up assholes who were in a band. The band didn't work out, and so now they're going to teach guitar, wanting astronomical amounts of money to, to be taught basic stuff, when I knew that I could find it in a book just as easily and for much cheaper. So, but yeah, I would say I'm 97, 98% self-taught. And now, and I didn't have the internet. Now you have the internet, and all that stuff is very, very much at your disposal. Take advantage of that stuff. Kel D. the Horse says that all his life is teachers and parents keep telling him to go to college. Your teachers and your parents are full of shit. The only time you really need to go to college is to be a teacher. And usually, I hate to say this, but teachers are usually people who their primary goal didn't work out. I know a lot of people who are teachers. As a matter of fact, a lot of people that I hang out with, their other friends think that I'm a teacher because I hang out with other teachers. And most teachers are freaking morons. The only reason they're teachers is because they have a teaching credential and they read the whole damn thing out of the teacher's edition. I know that might sound messed up, and I hope I'm not offending anybody who's a teacher or who has friends who are teachers, but that's the way it is. Most people are teachers because that's what they fell back on. So how does that feel? Your child will be taught by someone who fell back on something. And they didn't fall back in a private school. They did it in a public school, which we could talk about some other time. Let me see here. Nitro Java wants to know my favorite power metal bands. Oh, one of them is Gamma Ray. One of them is Stratovarius. I'm a huge fan of Dragonland, if you guys are familiar with Dragonland. A huge fan of Dragonland. And what's another band? And another band called Labyrinth. And what's the other band that I really like? They're more of a progressive band, though. Who is it? Serenity. I like Serenity a lot. Nintendo Gamer wants to know my thoughts on Aerosmith. My thoughts on Aerosmith? They were better when they were doing drugs, but they do okay. And they're one of the few old bands that are still around that don't piss me off. They have done nothing to piss me off. As far as I know, Joe Perry, Steven Tyler, those guys have said nothing. Because usually, and the time is going to come where something's going to come up in your Twitter stream, your Facebook stream, on the TV, where some old rock and roller is going to say something really fucking stupid, like Paul Stanley has a habit of saying, or Gene Simmons has a habit of saying every so often. And neither Steven Tyler or Joe Perry have done that to me. And I'm thankful for that. But, anyway. Let me see. I'm going to have trouble with this name. Saidur Hossein says, what's your Twitch channel? Twitch.com, Twitch TV, or what is it? Twitch.tv/the Yellkaos. You can find it down below. There's a link down there, so go ahead and click on that guy. Who else? IVM says, do you think that video game movies are going to replace comic book movies after people get sick and tired of Marvel vs. DC bullshit? Looks like Hollywood waiting to see how the Warcraft movie will do at the box office. I don't really give a shit. Movies suck. The only movies I get excited about anymore are Studio Ghibli films and Pixar films. Everything else is a bunch of over-budgeted crap. So, yeah. What is Kids171 wants to say, what are some non-game related gaming channels you like that you would recommend? Most of my stuff that I watch is guitar stuff, and I don't watch a whole lot of that, or it's wrestling stuff. I can't recommend anybody off the top of my head that's non-gaming related. I can't really think of anybody that I would recommend at the top of my head. I'm sure there's somebody that just, you know, I'd have to look in my sub box right now, but if I can think of somebody, I'll make a different video and I'll tell you fine folks all about it. Manic Maniac wants to know, do I like any folk metal? There's one band that really stuck out because they were around before anybody. It was called Fintroll. I liked Fintroll. All the other bands that came, because there was a glut of that type of music, and it still is kind of there, that came a few years ago, and I just thought that was kind of old before it got started. Like, I was not really all that thrilled about the sound of the hurdy-gurdy before that. So. Lewis Williams wants to know, what is my opinion on Lemmy Kilmister? Lemmy is God. Azuri Bone Dragon wants to be a lawyer, and he's pretty sure you need to go to law school for that. Well, not necessarily. All you have to do is get in trouble and then represent yourself. Of course, they say that the man who represents himself in court has a fool for a client. And I am that fool. Let me see. And Havel the Rock says, even if I want to be a video game developer, do you need college? No, you don't need college to make video games. You don't need college to virtually do anything. All you need is a friend in the front office. Seriously. Connections are far more important than any education, because you would be surprised how many people that you think are important for one reason or another probably faked their way through most of what they did. College is a money-making scheme for the college, and that is all. I think that's it for the questions. No? Let's see if we have anything over on the Facebook. Let me see here. Let me see. Antonio Sanchez, who apparently is recently into my work and calls me fella, said, what are my thoughts on Godzilla? I love Godzilla. I think he means more specifically, he says more specifically his recent return to Western minds. I don't really think that Godzilla has had a return to Western minds. I think that Hollywood has run out of steam for the time being, and so now they're just going to recycle old properties that used to make money. I think that Godzilla is best in the hands of Toho. Oh, and then Jonathan Torres dropped me something about the conspiracy and what we talked about that earlier in the program. We're over that. We're done with that now. Anyway, I want to answer a question or two, and then I'm going to get out of you guys' hair because I know I've been here for far too long, and I know that Cutie Bear wants to know if I would do a Y play of Catherine for the PS3. I don't own Catherine, and I can't really imagine how that would go over if I did a Y play of Catherine. Maybe if I can track it down for fairly inexpensive, maybe, because I was curious about that game because it's the only game I knew that came with boxer shorts. So, Schnozzy Schnozborn wants to know if I've ever listened to the band Rat. Everybody's heard of Rat, and I think that Rat's just okay. I don't think they're the greatest band. People like to give Warren DeMartini all this, credit for being such a great lead guitar player. I think he was fine for his time, but I'm not really thrilled with the work of Rat. They have those two songs that I like, Back for More and Round and Round, the hits. And Stephen Pearcy is a gigantic tool. Let me see. Yellkaos, Kelty the Horse says, Yellkaos, have you read The Catcher in the Rye? Way back when in school. I don't remember a lot about it. I prefer to Mice and Men myself. Do a Let's Play of Battletoads? I don't have Battletoads on the NES, and that game's ridiculously stiff. So, yeah. And Melvin Sky wants to know, is there any games I'm going to look for and buy at the Classic Gaming Expo? I'm going to look for them. I don't know that I'll want to pay convention pricing because I don't think the people at the gaming conventions, just like the people in the game stores, have not figured out that they're part of a shrinking market. And I want to say this right now, not to mean anything. I don't want to seem malicious when I say this, but I notice in the community that there's a few more game stores opening up, like on a regular basis. I'm like, oh yeah, please support my friend's game store. It's like, what the fuck are you buying into why are you opening a game store? Can you not recognize patterns? Can you not see that this market is on its way down? All you're doing is really pissing away your savings. You know, if I could hand out any advice, and if anybody's listening who has money that they want to burn, don't open a game store. So, but anyway, yeah, I'll be looking for games, but I don't know that I'm going to want to pay that price. So we'll see how that goes. And also, something that myself and Syphic and a few other people, we're going to be paying attention to the pricing and how people are negotiating, because that will really tell us where the market's going, and we'll be able to cue you fine folks in. Anyway, that's my time. And I thank you guys for stopping by. I really appreciate it, as I tell you every single week. But I also want to remind you to follow me on the Twitter and on the Facebook, and you'll find all the necessary links down below. And also, don't forget, Classic Gaming Expo coming up just a few weeks, cgexpo.com. And what else? I think that's it. So I'm going to get out of here. I thank you guys very much. I want to remind you that you're beautiful, and I'm Yellkaos. You guys take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.